and said, what's going on with your family? Because something was going on with her family. And when we don't pay attention to our kids' attendance, we're going to miss the supports that we could give them, right? So I'll just show you what this data means. So in the parentheses, you have the number of kids. So if you look at 2017, in parentheses, you see 153. That's the total number of students that were chronically absent. They were absent more than 18 days. And that's 4.3% of our population. So that was in 17-18, 4.3% of our elementary and middle population. If you look at this past year, we were up to 476 students who are chronically absent, and that's 12.9% of our population. And you know that whenever there's dashes, that is because there's not enough students in that subgroup, okay? So I just want to pause right there, and you see our subgroups broken down. And I think we shared this data ahead of time so you could have some time to look at it and come up with some questions that you have for us. We're not necessarily going to problem solve, but if we think about that continuous improvement cycle, we're going to be identifying needs right here together.
So I think two questions or thoughts arose to me as I looked at that obvious big jump from pre-COVID to post-COVID, right? And one of them I had is, and again, this is not necessarily need an answer, just the thought I had was two of them. One, when a student tests positive for COVID, that's automatic 5 days out. And so you get two of those in an academic year, which is not out of the realm of possibility,
Absolutely
right?
not.
One in the fall, one in the spring. Then you're at 10 right off the bat, no matter what you got.
Or throw in any other child illness there too,
exactly.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that jumps out at me, and we've talked about this in our policy committee meetings as well. I think since COVID, there's been a more greater understanding of keeping kids home when they don't feel well. I think there was a push to, perfect attendance. You go to school. If you're not feeling well, we'll try it out. But now there's more of we're going to keep you home, and a greater emphasis and recognition of mental health of students and mental health to kids staying home for anxiety, depression, mental health reasons. So those are just, I don't know how those fit into the numbers or what it means, but that's what jumped out at me when I first looked at this.
Yeah, those are all really great points, Brian. And these are just numbers at this point, right? And so what we did with our admin team is we then drilled down to the building level, and then they can drill down to the kid level. And when I was a building leader, and I would look at my chronic absenteeism or kids that were on their way to chronic absenteeism, I would know every story of every kid and every family so that we could provide the right intervention. And that's really the hard part about absenteeism, is because it's so unique. So for Brian's daughter, it could be one thing, and for Mary Caitlin's daughter, it's a completely different thing. And we've got to provide a different intervention to meet your need versus her need. And sometimes that's a family intervention. And a lot of times what you'll see as you're looking at chronic absenteeism is that it's a so if you have multiple children, the whole family is chronically absent. And that's not always the case, but that's typically what you'll see with a family. And a kid that's chronically absent when they're in first grade is probably chronically absent when they're in high school as well. You build up some habits, and there's some things that happen about not coming to school. And so it's really, really important that we intervene early and fast. So I flipped the screen to the high school. So you'll see here the high school chronic absentee data. So that's for our 9 through 12 buildings. And just take a minute. And I know it's hard because you can't put them side by side the way this slide deck is, but if you just take a look at 2017 for elementary, we had 4.3% of our kids chronically absent. And if you look at 2017 for our high school students, we had 11.7% absent. But look at 22-23. We jumped to 12.9% for our elementary, and we were at 17 for our high school. And so it's growth, but it's not as big of a jump. And so just things to wonder about, like what is happening at the high school that potentially is not happening at the elementary school. I don't know. And those are some of the things that will pop up as you're looking at attendance.
So I'm going to ask
go ahead, Brian.
I'm going to ask this a lot when it comes to data, just because it's a forum for question in my mind. But district wide, what does victory look like? Like what do we want? Like what is like the acceptable chronic,
which is a horrible thing to say, right?
Which is,
but yes.
I understand it's zero, but
right,
realistically,
we all do. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, the ethical answer is 0, but the state says that 5% is what they would accept as an end goal when you're writing your targets for reducing. They will accept 5% as the goal.
And is that based on anything? I mean, is that based on that you have of your population in general, people who are so, have some chronic issues?
Yeah.
And so therefore we should expect that 5% of the population, or is there other things? I just trying to understand where that came from.
I don't know what the state's reasoning is for that. I would imagine that
have
it's
that answer a
because
lot
there
with
are
the state.
just practical barriers to making sure every single kid is in. But yeah.
And these families coming in every year.
Yep.
We might not have gotten the intervention to yet.
Sure.
Tanya, in the past, I'm just curious, do we have historical information on why kids were absent?
Yeah, the buildings do. And so the buildings go through a process where they are looking at their chronic absentee data every 5 weeks or less. And they review that data. They provide interventions based on like the individual needs of families, right? So at the high school, a lot of times you'll see we get the kids more involved in the solution. So we'll get the students involved. Sometimes it's I don't have an alarm clock, or I miss the bus all the time. And so John and his team are really, really great about providing late transportation if we need to, so kids don't miss a full day. They might just miss some of the day. Sometimes it's a coordinated effort with the whole family. With the little ones, it's more of an intervention with the adults in the lives, right? What does your family need so that we can get you to school? Peter.
I raised my hand.
Yeah, you did.
Sorry, I'm just thinking through here in terms of interventions. It seems like there's a couple levels. Not always able to solve the absentee side is to solve the learning, right? That they're still able to learn and reach appropriate, what we hope are the levels for them. Is that, I mean, targeting both of those? Sure, we want to solve the absenteeism as well, but sometimes probably unable to, maybe out of our control. There are family issues, but learning, right? Learning interventions.
Yeah, and so Brian brought up, the absentees for COVID. And so we've been very gracious with makeup work and making sure kids can access things in Google Classrooms and things like that, so that the learning isn't lost forever. It's not as good because it's not in person, one-on-one, or in the classroom setting with all the conversation that happens and the attention, but it's better than nothing. And so I think that's one thing that the pandemic taught us to do, was to be more responsive to needs based on things that pop up. But there are ways to get after attendance at a tier 1 level. And Lisa and Lindsay actually have been working on a tier 1 campaign, and you might have seen it start. And it's really about messaging, because parents and families might not know how important it is. And yeah, that Disney World trip is really great. But if you do Disney World and then you're sick for 5 days, and then, there's the dentist appointment and then the doctor's appointment, and then all of a sudden your kids missed a lot of school, right? And so we are working on the education piece. So Lisa, do you want to speak to that a little?
Sure. So we're working on awareness. So we started with our leadership meeting in September. We shared all of this data. We gave administrators access to their individual building. They had the opportunity to drill down. And now it's about building awareness to the greater community. So here you are, we're learning more about it. Lindsay and I have been working on messaging to families. She's been writing up little blurbs. We've been using attendanceworks.org, which is a research-based organization. For the last 10 years, they've done attendance campaigns. It's all free resources for schools all across the country to utilize. They have lots of nice messaging in there that we can use in turnkey. So we've been taking advantage of that resource and sending that out to families. This month, I am putting together a screencastify for all of the faculty meetings, so our teachers will have this awareness too. It's also an opportunity for us to revisit the learning from day 187 for MTSS, right? So it's a chance for me to card out my continuous improvement data cycle and be like, oh, remember this? Let's apply this to attendance, right? So that's where we've started so far this school year.
I also want to note that the high school, and it's not necessarily huge drops in their chronic absentee rates, but from 21-22 to 22-23, we do see decreases in the total student population, but then in every subgroup except for one. And so something is working at the high school, and we'll, this year she'll tell us more if we still see that downward trend, but they're headed in the right direction, so that feels good for us. And if you think about it, a lot of times that can be related to student engagement. Do I want to be at school?
Mhm.
And you all have invested a lot into our high schools and into our clubs and activities and, all those field trips and things. All that stuff matters for kids to feel like they belong in a place.
Quick number question. So looking at the percentages, so like Black African American, it's 32.3%. Is that 32.3% of Black
That's
Black
correct.
students?
Yep.
Okay, not of the total.
Not of the
That's
total.
of
That's
that.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Other investments that the board has been committed to is alternative ed, and I know that there's a point to have the board go and visit and do a circle with those students and the leaders that are running that, and learning recovery. Those are pieces that help those students who are in that cycle that Brian was talking about earlier, and so I just so you could see where we're trying to address when kids do fall in those absentee rates.
Any other notice, wonders, thoughts on attendance? Go ahead, Peter.
What's your trend, like if you're already absent 2 by mid-October for this current year? So,
Yeah.
right, probably haven't had enough days that anybody's yet reached 18,
Oh, no.
I hope. Do we have
I
some
think we're
already?
close for some families to getting close to 18. But we start looking at the percentage absent. So what the first round was, I think it was 5 days or,
Yeah, so for the month of September, if you were absent 2 times, someone from the building should have reached out to your family and said, hey, I noticed you've been out twice this month. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help? There's been a shift kind of in interventions for attendance. It used to be a lot about, oh, all of these bad things can happen to you if you don't come to school. Okay, that's a little tone deaf, especially after the pandemic. So now the messaging is, much more welcoming and saying, okay, what can we do for you? How can we help? School has all of these great things to offer to make your child's life wonderful, right? We have meals here. We can help boost your learning that maybe slid over COVID. Friends are here. Teachers are here to take care of you. So that messaging is embedded in the attendance campaigns.
yeah, a lot more positivity to the attendance. And of course, legally, we have to send those attendance letters, which don't feel good at all for any of us to put in the mail. And then one of our building principals writes a personal note on all of theirs. Like, hey, we just want to see you back in school. Reach out if you need something. And what a nice touch that is, because it really, like Lisa was saying, it really is a personal thing. And it's not a Band-Aid intervention that you can find.
And I have to imagine, especially, I mean, there's one thing if the child is sick. There are going to be, my daughter was out for 5 days because she had
Yeah,
COVID. So,
yeah.
that's one thing, and the school's aware of that. But I think the last thing, I'm sure some of these families are battling whatever they're battling. And the last thing they need is a school to say, I'm sure they're already feeling the weight of it. And I think anything we can do in partnership is a good thing.
Yeah, if you go back to our strategic plan, we welcome our families in as partners, right? And you're not a partner if we're telling you horrible things about what's going to happen to your kid.
Looking at the numbers too, it jumps out at me, and I notice it seems to disproportionately affect our Black and brown students. Students with students with disabilities, and just
That's what
I
equity
don't
work's
have
all
a,
about,
I don't have
right?
a second part
Yeah.
of that, right? It just
Yeah, and that's why we do our DEI work, right? Because we know, and this is not a Fairport. I just want to stress that too. This is not just a Fairport issue. This is a United States of America issue. United States has a problem with attendance. United States has a problem with disproportionality, and Fairport is a microcosm of that. So, we can't throw our hands up and say, well, so is everybody else. These are our kids. So
Yeah.
yeah.
When you did share this over the summer, were folks surprised or like, yes, I saw this?
I think people knew the narrative that attendance had gotten worse post-COVID, but I don't know if people knew how bad it had gotten. When you see these numbers that are very, very staggering and double and sometimes almost triple the amount of kids, that's a really big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were like, whoa.
The triple in the elementary level is just shocking.
I know.
I was very shocked by elementary.
Yeah. Yep.
The foundation of learning, and if they're not
Yeah.
not learning, and is it that they don't want to come to school? Is it that there's a barrier to get them to school?
Could be all the things,
Yeah.
Jan, right?
as an elementary parent, so very many germs.
Yes.
And then, then you're right. The messaging was, if you're sick, stay home.
Right.
And I agree with that. But then I know I got texts from friends in the morning, and it would be like, well, they don't have a fever and they're not throwing up, but they're not healthy. Like what,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
that toss up of like, do I send them? Do I
Yeah.
not send them? So I know that particularly coming off of COVID has been a real tough call to make.
I don't want to say this out loud, but I'm also the parent of small people. And last year was really rough at my house, really, really rough. And so far, it's been a good year. So we'll see. I think, and I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. But there was a lot of talk about kids' immune systems after having not been exposed to a lot of germs over a while. And so I think in my opinion, we felt some of that last year with our little ones and as adults of those children. So hopefully that part we can put to bed a little bit. But we still have built some habits. And so we've still got to change the messaging. And it's not like it was great before. So let's just remember that, right? We had an issue prior to COVID. So even if we take COVID out of the arena, we still had an issue. All right, who's ready to talk? New York State testing. All right, let's go. All right. So this is very high level data, just Fairport that you'll see here. And you'll see Fairport's proficiency rates. So that scores 3 and 4 on the New York State test, grades 3 through 8. From 2018 to 2023. Obviously, there's no tests in 20 or 21 because of COVID. They were canceled. So you will see here for math, the historic, and this is a little bit tricky, but remember it's kind of cohort data, right? So in the beginning, the third graders are the first bar, but that same group of kids is now the second bar in fourth grade, right? Does that make sense? You got to follow them up, and then the third bar in fifth grade. So that's the group moving through the system. And then you got to skip a couple years because of no COVID, and now I don't know what grade they're in. No, but that's math. And then I also shared with you our ELA proficiency. So ready to take some comments, questions, thoughts?
All right, so same question I had on the absenteeism. What's victory look like? Like, what is our target? What is a target, a reasonable, good target for Fairport schools to be hitting in proficiency rates for both of these?
Well, again, 100%, right? And so I've been trying to live with this little saying that I heard at at an event I was at, which is, at what point is failure acceptable? And so I don't even like to put a number on that. I want to see positive growth in the right direction. I'm sure there's a number that New York State would tell us, but because we're not a school that's been identified as a district that's been identified as needing improvement, they're not giving us that number. So we need to do that ourselves.
So
Brett.
I know what victory is here.
Okay.
Right. It's using the data in a very thoughtful way, intentionally to inform where the gaps are. And then wherever the gaps are, we need to assemble the troops and make sure that we're organized, that we're giving time on task so teachers can talk about the learning and the teaching. And then it's like a continuous improvement cycle. And
Yes.
and I think
There's a little
that's
diagram and everything.
so that's where the win will come,
Yeah.
because I truly believe when you have educators collaborating around meaningful work, it will yield results.
And I think we have to frame, when we're talking particularly about the New York State test, this is not an assessment that every kid can gain the mastery. That's not how New York State frames this. So the cut scores change. There will always be kids in the 1 and 2s. Now a 1 in 2019 might look different than what a 1 in 2023 looks like.
Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about this, and I think this is a very interesting conversation to be having, I think we also need to very much frame it for whoever might be listening at home that this is a 1-2 day snapshot of a kiddo.
Yeah.
It is not something that 100% of our kids can get mastered, because that's not how scores work on this type of assessment. But we have or are developing a lot more nuanced assessments to fill out that picture of these students.
That's right.
Yeah.
And,
That assessment suite to look at that picture of these kids.
Right,
So
and-
I just want to frame that.
No, and Brett, I just want to say how much I appreciate you saying what you said. And one of the things that I wondered looking at this is, as a district, we have never been a full-on state testing district, right? I mean, very high profile. many years ago, it's one of the reasons,
Mm-hmm.
we liked Fairport schools when we were moving to this area because of that. And so, like MC, like you said, it's one data point, but I'm glad there's no target number, because I don't want, and it's not useful for schools to we don't want to be, okay, we got to hit 80% across the board, because that's teaching to the test. That's not, and that's kind of antithetical, I think, to who we are as a district. So, Brad, I just want to say I appreciated you framing it like that.
And I appreciated what Mary Caitlin was speaking to, this suite that needs to be developed. And I think when I just see this, and where victory is that we're not just looking at New York State assessment. Victory is that there's multiple assessments across grade levels, so you could see the continuity and the spiraling of the learning occurring. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
And if I could share a wonder and a thought. So as I was looking across ELA and math, our math got the expressions program in 2019, right? So our kiddos rolled that out, and they've been going, and now we're on year 4 of expressions. Right. ELA is rolling out this year. So I have a big wonder of what this is going to look like at the end of this year, at the end of next year.
Absolutely.
And that impact.
Yeah, you're right on target with that. When you have a solid tier 1 program, right, that's part of MTSS, then you should see more kids in the proficiency range in this assessment and any assessment. And I think that that's why we saw such big growth in math. And we get to compare across the state and in the county and things, and we did make some really serious growth in math, and it's something to be celebrated, and it's not something then we rest on our laurels, right? We've got to keep moving and pushing. And it's not because of this assessment, but it's because of what happens in the end when kids graduate from high school, when we're at 92% graduation rate, and that's fine. And then 8% aren't graduating. So we've got to get after it down here at these younger grades to make sure our kids are growing. I don't necessarily care, like Mary Caitlin said, it's impossible to get everybody to proficiency, but I want to see every kid moving up, right? If we're staying stagnant, then we're not doing our job. We've got to continue to push and grow.
Oops, sorry.
I know.
Sorry.
Is it okay if I ask a question? Or
Yeah,
do you
go
wanna
ahead. You can ask a question.
All the things.
Just gabble it.
Yeah. So I know we're talking about other ways that we're assessing kids. Do we see a correlation? Yeah.
So Lisa just whispered to me, "Can I say
that's
the
what
thing
I.
about the
Yeah.
thing?"
So that's
she's
what
going to
I've
say
been
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we just finished our data reviews in the elementary schools just like a week or so ago. And big difference between the math and ELA scores. I did a screencastify, just trying to teach people about the pyramid and what we would expect to, like what percentage of the population we would expect to need intervention. And in math, where we've had that nice solid math expressions curriculum in place, we were below the target, which is amazing. And I'm anticipating now that we've got 95% in wit and wisdom to roll out, I would expect that our reading scores would follow suit. But it was really exciting to see how much stronger the math scores were just in the screening process this fall.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we're hoping to have a report for you next month, but it might not be till December, where we're part of a research study where teachers who piloted 95%. And teachers who did not pilot 95%, we're looking at their NWEA scores and their ELA and IXL scores. And so we are seeing a very big difference in the IXL scores. I want to say 18% growth in writing from over the year for piloting classes versus non-piloting classes. And so apparently we're having a water break. Thank you so much. Excuse me.
I know. Could I have some lemon?
I guess I was sounding a little scratchy. So we are seeing that difference. We can also, even identifying kids for intervention. So Lisa mentioned we just finished that process at our elementary schools. Math was very exciting, celebratory. Whew, we're doing it. The pyramid's starting to look the right direction because of solid tier 1, and we know that's why. For our piloting classes, you could tell kids that had a pilot teacher of 95% and kids who didn't. It was that much of a difference, especially in those early grades, the foundational skills. So we're really excited to see what happens after a full year of every teacher doing 95% in weight and wisdom. And then when we're at the point where we are with expressions, what our numbers are going to look like. And again, one data point, right? When we do our interventions, we're using NWEA, Ames Web Screeners, right? And so we have multiple data points to decide if kids are in intervention. This is more like the outcome piece.
I would say the one thing that I'd like to see back to the win is the curricular common assessment. And I think you'll start seeing that as we move along. I know you're seeing it in math. I know at the middle school they're piloting some common assessments because I think that's really where you get in the content specific standards where we can assess. So that's what I'm excited for.
Go ahead, Jan.
Something I always wonder, and before I say that, I think it's important for people to remember that when they're looking at like third grade, I think people forget that those are 4 different classes. You know, they're like those, and I think any teacher will tell you that no class from year to year is alike. You know, and I think it's very easy to say, oh my goodness, look at how far, you know, look at the third graders went down. Oh, the fifth graders went up. Those are that's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people forget that, not, you know, when you're just kind of looking at data. So I'm much more concerned with thinking, okay, you know, where are the third graders today? You know, where are they now? Where are they now in 9th and 10th grade?
Yeah,
What kind of
exactly.
coursework are they taking? And then I'm always interested to know when teachers receive their scores, you know, of their class, and they look at their class list and they know that child, you know, Tanya or Elisa, day in and day out, how much do, how predictive are the scores to that child that they're seeing in front of them day to day? And I know that's not a question for you to answer.
No, that's okay.
But I think I think it kind of goes to MC's point about
And it would probably
the
be
whole picture.
more related to, it wouldn't necessarily be related to these because they wouldn't get the New York State stuff until later.
Right.
So it'd be more related probably to the NWEA ones, right?
Yeah. And I would just say, so the NWEA does make predictions on what you'll get on the ELA and math for New York State. They've correlated all that data. And those are pretty true, I would say. It's a national data set, right? So it's tons and tons of points that they build that correlation off of. I would say what you're talking about, Jan, really happens in high school for Regents. Like a really good teacher can tell you like almost within 5 points what a kid's going to get on a Regents because those are measured in a completely different way than these tests are. And the cut scores don't change and the questions are relatively predictable and the formats are relatively predictable. And so in New York State, I will say in some of these tests, especially in ELA, if you think about the rope, right? We know the science of reading and Scarborough's rope. If you think about that comprehension and that background knowledge, that can play so much into the ELA exam. I remember when I was city school principal, there was a question about farming. And a lot of my kids just didn't have context. Where here in Fairport, they drive by a sheep farm every day, right? And so it changes the outcome on those tests, and that's where biases can seep into testing. That's why we don't want to make decisions based on one test. That's why we want to have a swath of data. And so what we do with this now, just so you know, is at our next leadership cabinet meeting, we'll have disaggregated data by building and grade level and standards, and then our teams can look and see like, oh, they, you know, ELA standard 4.AA1B, which also, by the way, there's a whole lot of standards, right? Was a weakness for me, but at JA, it was a strength. I wonder what JA's teachers did that we weren't doing, right? And so you can start to have those conversations. You can do that across classrooms. Like if Brett really knocked it out of the park on something, we can talk about what happened in his room versus not. We also know that those standards spiral, right? So there's a kindergarten standard that then leads to a first grade standard that leads to a second grade standard. And so if our kindergarten class, like Jen was saying, sometimes there's a group of kids moving through. And if we had a group of kids moving through that were really, really weak on whatever standard it is, we know that in the next year, they're probably going to be really, really weak on that standard again. And so we've got to do something different for them in third grade than they got in second.
So my wonder is, okay, we get the data to the educators. It's broken down by standard. It's very rich and stuff. And then what happens? How does that data cycle look? Like, are they spending time on superintendent's conference days? Do they have time in their schedules? We know how busy our teachers are.
Yeah, so that'll be work that happens at grade level meetings. So we started that last year for the first time in a while. and we'll do it again. So we look forward to doing that. That is one criticism of New York State testing, is that it's so late, right? Like, school's already started, and we were going to have to make course adjustments based on last year's test. It's really tricky, but we have a plan to do that. Yeah.
And some of it you're probably going to comment on what I'm going to ask you. So go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. I was going to make a connection with how we're using the data out of data reviews. So we did that process, and now the grade level meetings are coming up this month. So Jackie Sauter and I, we've been tag teaming those meetings together, and we're teaching the teachers how to use the Ames Web data, how to look at accuracy, how to look at rate. We're having them sort the children in their class by those characteristics or areas that need support, and then we're giving them interventions that they can use during win time to address those needs. So we are responsive in trying to help the teachers use the data and have easy tools for them to be able to plug it away, because we know, Jackie and I know how hard they're working on 95% win wisdom. So anything we can do to lighten their load and help them feel, that things are manageable, we want to do that. And obviously this is also part of creating a culture, bless you, of knowing how to use data to inform instruction, and how to use data and how to inform intervention.
I was curious, you kind of hit at this, but if you want to go, if there's any more, how teachers are responding to your work in MTSS, but with the data, because I can see a point where you see a lower test score or not like a down year or something like that. It can be human nature to kind of get defensive, especially given New York State testing and all the things with New York State. So I'm curious how the teachers are kind of responding and to this kind of not new, but this area, this information, and working with it.
Yeah.
Sure, and there is a new component to it, right? Like, everyone's going through letters training right now. There's just so much new learning about reading and application of things that we're learning about reading. So I think, there is some anxiety to that, right? Having to apply new things that we're learning. But I have to say the feedback from the teachers have been really positive. So it feels good going
awesome.
through it.
So one thing, we're in our infancy here, right? And I think that it's important to recognize, you said the culture of habits that we need to start developing and investing in. And that's going to take some time. And I think, people have always talked about the continuity piece. But in order for us to build that organizational capacity, aligning the resources, we're talking about budget goals, making sure that our resources, we put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. So I don't want to make any misconceptions that we have work to do, but we're excited about it, and we appreciate the opportunity to. I mean, this improvement cycle, I am psyched to see this.
Superintendent Provenzano loves the improvement cycle.
I like
He really
the arrows;
loves it.
they're fun.
I mean, it is a great cycle. I just wanted to also add that, when teachers feel empowered and know what to do to help a kid, that's the whole reason we went into teaching. And when you can equip them based on data to move the needle, that is the most powerful thing for a teacher. Hattie's work calls it teacher efficacy, knowing your impact. And we're supporting teachers in getting those tools. Some teachers had it and it was just a little nudge, and some teachers wanted it and didn't know how to do it. And some are coming along just because that's where we're headed, and that's okay, because in the end, the kids are going to benefit.
And Lisa, I've had feedback from teachers who had said that you had pushed into their grade level meetings and how helpful it was. So that's I was hoping you would touch on it. That's what I was going to say. But I think so I appreciate it. But I think also, when you're a teacher, you want to help everybody, right? You want to meet the needs of every student. But I think having some direction on, where to focus can be very helpful. And when you're doing a consistent cycle, it might look different in a month. Yeah. So that's why you need to always be reevaluating.
So the cool thing about data is it's amazing the conversations that you branch off that are it's so far away from the data, and that's what's exciting too. And I think about, when you're a teacher, all the world's a stage, and we want you to express your artistry. We want you to be engaging, creative, be your best version of yourself, but at the same time, having a formula to plug it into a system, I think that's a strong balance. I appreciate that work.
It's been great. I did just want to go back to WIN. So we talked about WIN time. Just for anybody who's listening, WIN is what I need. And a lot of times we use acronyms that people don't know. So what I need is built into every single day of every K-5 student's schedule. And during that time, kids either go to intervention based on their scores or receive intervention or enrichment in their classrooms based on their scores. And so Lisa was talking about the kids that aren't going to intervention, equipping the teachers to help the kids that are staying behind with what they need exactly to move the needle for them.
And we saw that in action at our school visit at JA,
Yep.
and it was awesome. It
Yeah.
was so cool.
That's so great. All right. Anything else? Did we beat our time? Well, we've got other things we can talk about. You have to go. No,
Do you
I'm
want to
just
talk about something?
kidding. No, I don't. Thank
Yeah, so
you.
I just, don't mean to put you on the spot, but we talk about a data dashboard, and it's something that it seems so easy, but we're trying to put our fingers on it, and can you speak about how we're trying to develop this?
Yeah, Lisa's been doing a lot of work, especially with our instructional technology department on reviewing dashboards that will make sense for us as a district and hit all the needs that we have. And so we're hoping to bring one to the SIT team to review in probably December, January. And then after feedback there, because we've got to get buy-in from the teachers, right? That's only going to be as good as everybody understanding and using that at some levels, and it's going to be different levels for everybody, but we've all got to be using it, and then come and do a presentation
One thing
if invited.
kind of based on that, and it's a wonder I have is, when this data is on the dashboard, and it's great that it's out there and people can see it, and we want them to be able to see it, but people not acting in good faith can pick a number and point out, say that that's
Sure.
a deficiency when it's not. It's one data point, it's one test,
Yep.
it doesn't handle assessment. And it's a wonder that I have is how we collaboratively as a district, teachers, administrators, board, Lindsay.
I was going to say, bring her over.
Yeah, but ensuring that the data is out there and people will point. But I guess just kind of making sure that the story that we're giving the full story, that we're telling that full story, that it's not more than one data point, it's more
Right.
than one number.
I think that's critically important, because I think that's where it got lost before in the messaging. And I know that we've spent a lot of time trying to get back to this day, this moment. And I'm really excited that we're having this conversation here. And I think as we move forward, we story the data points and what the data points mean, and how do we celebrate them? How do we use them as a tool for improvement? Because any organization uses data to improve its performance, and you use the data to look inward, and that's okay. I mean, we're all trying to be reflective and the best. So I'm excited I think we have a great partner in Lindsay and the school improvement team to really try to frame that messaging. But you're 100% right. We have to be very clear with our messaging.
I mean, you like you always say, budgets tell a story and data tell a story too. So
It does, and I think we, as a district, it's our responsibility to make sure that our consumers, our families, and our community understand what the data is telling us, and then they also understand what we're doing to address gaps.
So it becomes equally incumbent on us. I think the other side of that, Brian, though, is also for us not to pick a data point that overly states, right? That we also pick is, you can pick a single one that makes you look bad. You can pick a single one that makes you
course.
look good, and shouldn't, right? And shouldn't. And so we do have to be careful about that as well. And I think the other caveat wonder of any organization is then that data is used in such a way that ultimately it encourages the wrong behavior, right? The manipulation of data underneath, where, because you've seen that in schools or other things,
Yeah.
that where the data has been used in such a way that the pressure is too much, and so people somehow got encouraged to do things that is not ethical.
Well,
And so we want to. I think I love even the positive messaging. That's
Yeah.
really the way. This is really for improvement across the board. It's for kids best, and so we're going to try and be as honest as we can with the data. But it's not going to be a single point on a bad day. Not going to be the best point on a great day. We're going to look at multiple points across years and across days and across grade levels and students over time and blah blah blah.
but like Dr. White was saying, what is success, and what is, it's a performance suite. I know you said what is success, but you were talking about multiple ways.
Citation.
Multiple ways. I know how to get my citations right. Multiple ways to define student success in Fairport. Is it the number of activities that you're involved in? Is it the colleges that you go to? Is it your school to work? Is it your AP scores? Is it your proficiency, et cetera? So I think this is going to give us an opportunity to have more conversations on the well-rounded student, so we don't get narrowed into this is just one way to define success.
If
If
Yeah.
only our mission said the whole child. Every child, each child, and the whole child. And I think that what you were just saying, Brett, aligns really nicely with where the Board of Regents is pushing us with the growth in the graduation requirements. And I think this work looking at that our kids are not a test score, our kids
Yeah.
are not a Regents score,
That's right.
our kids are learners. So
Mhm.
how do they demonstrate that mastery of that learning? I think that this is going to pair really excitedly.
Yeah, and we were talking a lot about test scores, and you were kind of alluded to it, but a dashboard should also show all those other measures that make our kids a whole child, like our mission, right? And that's part of what we're looking for, right? And to show that growth.
But you have clubs, right? I mean, clubs and activities and who's
Yeah.
in multiple different. So we're looking forward to hearing that report as we move forward.
Absolutely,
So-
yeah.
As a trusted adult.
Yeah, who's got a trusted adult, who feels like they belong in school. All of those things should be driving our work. And never, I will just say, our school improvement team will never use the data as a weapon against any kid, any family, or any staff member. It is really a tool for us all to reflect and grow and do better.
That's a mic drop right there.
And at that point,
Nice work.
More water.
I do.
I saw you drinking it. You drank it.
Mm.
Thank you. Tanya and Lisa, thank you. Okay, so we move on to the 2024, 25. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm not there yet. Yeah. Budget goals, and this would also be a discussion. Everybody good? So I'm probably going to ask folks from our budget and finance team to kind of talk through it, since I know you have more details than I do.
So, our, yeah. on
It's
the-
right up here too. It's right on the
The
board doc
humorous
too.
side is, right, do we have 9 goals or just 3 with sub-points, right? I mean, and really it is just trying to keep the goals down to a reasonable number with the bullets to be more of the talking points of the emphasis and the focus throughout the year, and do they align in even some of the goals. I think it's great. We learn a lot every year, but this really is a time for us to tell the story. What's our emphasis for the 24-25? We've heard about progress already being made this year, where we've placed our money for positions and other things in terms of all the student supports. How do we continue along? And, we only have preliminary information, but I think what's proposed overall is designed to keep us along that improvement path in a facilities way, right? And I didn't mean to emphasize like that's the first one, but we're talking about the students themselves, their performance, or they feel that last description, Tanya, you were giving, right? That they want to be at school, they have connections. How do we continue along those lines? But that the facilities themselves are safe and inviting, and that financially we can weather the storms. And that's the long one. There will be storms, right? There will be storms, and we need to, I think, always make sure we feel like we have the financial wherewithal to manage that on our terms and not on the terms of the storm itself, right? So how do we create what the word I guess I'd like to use with Brett is soft landings in our budget process and in our fiscal responsibility to say, okay, if we need to go through a time of lower sales tax and state who has made cuts in the past and probably make cuts in the future. I hope not, right? But how do we weather that? So that's, I think, the emphasis of the three priorities there. Keep us on our improvement for children, keep our facilities where they are, and maintain us in sound fiscal position to manage storms in the future.
Can we give thoughts now?
Absolutely. No,
No.
these
Done.
are dictated
And I was
to
going
you.
to say, if you're listening at home, the budget goal discussion with the priorities is on the screen here right now. So I think the camera should be showing it. No? I think so.
I don't know how that
Somebody
works.
want to go to YouTube? Is
I
that
don't-
what they're seeing?
Well, no, I don't. Does it usually show what we're looking at, or does it show
Sometimes
us?
it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Oh,
Depends,
tricky.
yeah.
I know. Split screen.
Yeah, but this is
In
this is a meeting in public, so
Yeah.
it's not a public meeting, so it's people,
Okay, so one thought that really jumped out at me. First of all, I love the first goal, the prioritize our school improvement. The UPK, we know we want to push the MTSS, the equitable access to student-centered programming. I question, and goal number 2, obviously, we want to keep our sustainability. I question number 3 with the use of the word reserves. When we're writing a budget, I don't feel like it aligns that we should be planning for extras to go into a reserve. I know we almost always have it, right? But our dream, the dream of writing a budget would be what we tax and collect from the state is equal to what we spend in a year, right? We know that doesn't happen. We know our nightmare would be to run a deficit. But I don't love a goal where we're planning on extras. So my first thought was that 4th bullet under goal number 1, that could be number 3, investing in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities, because we've talked about that hope to either have 0.5% or 1% item line year after year, just planned for that we're investing in our facilities, right? So is there a way we could do that and then sub bullet, because we know we want one more big capital project to hopefully hit our middle and elementary schools, and then to roll into small continuous capital projects that as debt falls off, we can roll things in. I just, the reserve idea, I don't.
In my mind, there's a disconnect in what you say. I hope you don't mind me saying it that way, right? That we want to do the one, but base it on a hope of extras. And to me, that third goal is designed that we're not going to go with hope. We're going to go with planned for that third large project,
Sorry.
right? I know. It's,
sorry.
yeah, no, a round board table in some ways would be so nice for
Go
discussion.
back to the round.
But anyway, no,
Right, sorry,
but that's right. The deliberateness of needed. We've been talking about 3 large projects for how many years? The second one seemed like a surprise, not to us, right? Because we've been talking about, but we got to keep the messaging up. There is still a third one that's needed because of what's the huge needs are. I just don't think we can work on a hope for excess.
I think-
But
in
do
the
we,
budget process. Sorry.
does that go into our reserve goals then? As we approach the end of the year and we finish everything up at the end of June, theoretically, it's always.
I think I'm
after
reading
that.
it differently.
I just don't, the use of reserves in budget planning, the planning that we would have extra money comes across to me like we're planning to tax more in order to fill our reserves.
Oh.
And that's not
I
what
can
we
see
would
what
be doing.
I can see how you could. I can see both. I can see.
Yeah,
how,
I was
how-
not interpreting it that way
No,
at
but I
all.
can absolutely.
My interpretation of it was more that we're going to look at those reserves and how we can use them so we don't have to increase taxes.
No, but so when we're writing our budget, though,
yeah,
we're not writing to have extra in reserve accounts.
That's correct. There would not be a line item for that, but at the end of the year, when we get through all the, just like what we'll discuss a little bit later with the audit is finally complete. We have a clear picture. Sales tax came in very strong, right? Interest revenue soared because rates went up so fast. So we found ourselves in a very positive position, unanticipated. So we prioritized where that goes. That's supposed to be the sense of it. So, right,
Yep.
if there's a,
So is that a sub bullet then? Because that's not us budgeting for extra money to have in a reserve.
I
We
see, yeah.
are saying we want to invest in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities. That's our goal. And maybe one of those sub bullets then is if there is extra, prioritizing our capital reserves.
I see. I think I see what you're saying, MC. Like on one hand, I like having it starting to talk about preparing for phase 3 because, like Peter said, like you said, like this is this is something we're talking about. This is something we're planning, and I like starting that messaging now. And we are thinking of this, and we're thinking of, minimizing the effect of taxpayers on
Right.
phase 3. But I do wonder, and I hadn't thought of this, so I'm glad you brought it up. But having it as its own separate standalone budget goal, along with, this because if these are our budget goals, like this is the story we're telling as the budget starts getting put together, and is one of the 3 most important things we're doing starting to tuck money away for a future capital proposal.
I kind of, well,
I'm sorry if I'm misrepresenting. I apologize, but that's like
I don't see it as tucking money away. I feel like we did, using what we currently have as well. I actually thought it was timely to have this based on lots of discussions that we had with the community about the capital improvement project and, why aren't we using this and that?
So may I, just as a suggestion, and if this hits all the points, maybe some wordsmithing on that, because prioritize fund, like maybe somehow prioritize funding, prioritize funding of district capital reserves. I wonder if there's a way to wordsmith that so it kind of addresses your concern that as we fund reserves, as we normally do, the priority of that process becomes the capital fund, putting it away in capital reserves, as opposed to other reserve plans. I don't feel like I'm making sense, but I feel like I'm.
No, you're.
Okay.
Matt to jump in. I feel like Matt wants to say something.
I'm good.
this
Don't
is-
put me in this.
I guess I also don't want to limit us when we're talking about facilities to just
Phase
the
3.
reserves phase 3. I also want us to, when we're writing this budget, be looking at where can we do it in other places and where can we
Yeah,
dog mark? No, what's the word?
Earmark.
Earmark.
Oh my god.
Dog ear. You're thinking dog-eared.
Dog earmark. Ooh, that's good.
Where can we have that so it's more predictable in our budget? So I kind of want a bigger goal looking at facilities where, yes, we're prioritizing capital project, but we're also prioritizing what we can do in our budget that we currently have.
So if I'm listening and understand, I'm trying to do that more. So like, shut up, Pete, don't respond. I think the point, if I'm listening, I'm stuck on that. Budget is plan. We are not necessarily planning excess money. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's
Essentially,
my
we're-
concern.
our
Yeah.
taxes aren't going necessarily specifically for that. They have purposes.
Correct.
Our operations is emphasis for people to know. It's like, great, we have the community approved our budget of X dollars, but if we can not spend every single penny, don't look at it as every single penny, then that allows us to save up for, or things come in higher than anticipated, right? I mean, it works on both sides. So you don't have to spend as much. Is that what you're saying? That this gives a focus of we are purposely planning to do that?
Correct. When I first read it, I'm
Which I
like,
don't think is wrong, by the way, either. But I didn't. That wasn't the intent when we initial wrote. Right.
That's
right.
it's when I first read it, I was like, whoa, we don't plan for reserves in a budget. We don't budget for reserves. Reserves are, we know we generally have extra because we often are able to save money here, save money there, but we don't write our budget in the hope that we have money at the end of the year. Our dream is that we're taxing and collecting from the state exactly what we're spending.
So I don't agree necessarily with that, Dream, because even in my personal budget, I do put.
You'd
I
prefer to have,
budget. Well, I budget savings, right? I
Mhm.
budget
But-
put some
but
money in
we
savings.
don't.
Well, we haven't. I would say
We
that
don't write a line item and say like our taxes are going to this reserve account.
we
Like,
haven't, but it's not unheard of. Other school districts do that specifically, right?
okay, so is that what we are aiming for then?
No, that was not the intent.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
that was not the intent. So I think if I've heard you correctly, that was not the intent of the writing. It was the intent to emphasize we still need to
Yeah.
get there without, so that we minimize another shock of, $60 per 200,000 household. We want to see if we can't save up for that.
Yeah, and I completely wholeheartedly agree. I want us to hopefully be able to do phase 3 with no tax impact. That's
I
the
just don't like the word hope that you've used now a couple times, right? It's like, I don't want to do it on a hope. I think we should try and get there. But it wasn't also intended to say have a line item. So I can see the challenge of what you're saying.
The
right?
purpose,
It's-
the purpose behind that, just by being around this for a couple of years now, is it's always been a shock, and I think that it was trying to get some clarity and be
What
transparent.
has always been a shock. I'm sorry.
Um, w- where
The capital project.
the capital projects and how are we paying for it,
just
and
know what it
you know
was.
why are you using this
Yep.
reserve, or why aren't you using
Mhm.
So I think that's was the intent of trying to be transparent of, hey, we're very intentional. There is a phase 3, and in order for us to minimize or additional tax impact, let's just call it out. And I think there's got to be a like you said, a wordsmithing to achieve that.
Could we come to it that final bullet under number 1, the invest in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities, becomes goal 3, and within that we prioritize or say something along the lines of, when it comes to reserve planning, we are prioritizing our capital reserve project for phase 3 capital improvement. We are investing, I don't know how to say it, the line item that we've kind of started to brainstorm into facilities, like planning yearly for facility improvements
Matt, you were going to say something.
and having that 2-part.
Oh, okay, you're okay.
I just feel like he's got like bubbles on his head, that thought
he
bubbles,
looks
where he just wants
Looks
to.
like
I know,
he's playing
he's-
Family
trying
Feud.
to
He's
read
Either
doing
that, I
these-
just really want your knowledge right
Well,
now.
I mean, I'll jump in a little bit, right? When we talk about budget planning and we think about how we budget and we assign a fund balance of about $3.8 million right now, and we assign reserves of $2.3 million. So if we spend everything, we are starting at a deficit of $6 million before we've even talked about any increases to the following year budget. So in some sense, we try to be sure that we can continue to support that assigned fund balance and hope that we're not deficit spending as a whole as a district, right? And then beyond that, once we get to year end and we talk as an audit and finance group with our external auditor, we talk about prioritization of the reserve funding with year end fund balance and how those funds are allocated. And I think as a group, we talked about the future planning, because right now we know that our building aid ratio is about 75%, right? So 25% is coming from the local share. And then inherently in any capital project that school districts undertake, there are unaidable portions of a project in and of itself. So then we start to see more of a local cost and share, and then we can have those big ticket items and that large impact on a home in the district. How do we help mitigate and support that with these larger capital projects and even some of the smaller ones, because there still will be that local share. So I think that's the balance and goal overall, is to help to continue to not have that major sticker shock on a capital improvement project when we move forward in the future. I guess that's the
To address Mary Kalen's, I don't think that's a bad proposal though, right? To make that the goal actually is, it's about the facility. Let's make the facility its own goal
Right. 'Cause
itself.
I think
We
I
can
think
have a couple sub bullet points. We have talked about 1 to 1.5% of our operating budget go towards, and Aaron just right. Or, I thought, no, I was thinking of all the number of work orders you mentioned that was done in the month of September, closed.
crazy.
Not to have it slow down, right? That the budget supports that you can continue to close those
And
numbers, but also this one. But
Mhm.
I guess the point is, we, in every way possible, so that nobody's surprised and
Yeah.
we're, right, that we
Mhm.
talk about, we are trying to save up for, because there's still things in this building and all the other buildings that need significant improvement. And we think that's a third and final, and we can transition to something that's smaller and manageable and doesn't have those types of impacts. I just want us to communicate it from every angle, from the budget angle,
All the
from
time.
right,
all the time. Yeah.
time.
No, I love the pulling out investing modern, sustainable, environmentally sustainable, safe facilities as its own bullet. For one thing, sustainability gets its own part of the budget goal, which is huge and amazing. But as we said, like, the budget tells a story and budget goals tell a story. And this is something we've been talking about as a board for a long time, is making sure we're investing in all of our schools, and the capital campaigns and the capital projects have focused on the high school for very important and reasons that we've communicated. And all of our schools need love, and the high school continually does too. So I think setting that out as its own goal, I think that is, as I was looking at this and during this conversation, I'm like, it's kind of it's saying the same thing. Like those are two, kind of two parts of this. I can't speak tonight.
It's okay,
Dog earmark. But no, I do like pulling that out as its own budget goal,
think it
because
needs-
then also looking at that, pulling that out, number 1 becomes much more about supporting student programming, supporting learning. Can somebody tell me what WC programming is? And
Whole child.
Whole child. That I've never seen that abbreviated in
I'm sorry.
9 years in the district.
That was your quiz for
We would,
Workers'
never, we
comp?
would never put that out.
Your workers' comp.
Okay, but no, I think number one focuses on programming, and a lot of our talks and a lot of our budget talks and capital improvement talks have been facilities, have been physical needs, and I think supporting programming, supporting our teachers, supporting our kids, supporting our paras, all that, UPK, my goodness, all of that.
Do you think that, okay, so if we pulled the investing in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities, do you think that's specific enough?
Oh, I think. Oh, I keep turning it off. I think keep the sub bullets.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Three becomes a sub bullet of that. I
Correct.
think that works.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
works.
So just the way I'm reading this, invest in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities, and then a sub-bullet would be, now I could be wrong, so please correct me, dedicate financial resources to support modernization upkeep of district facilities. That's one bullet.
Yep.
Bullet two,
Hold on.
bullet two is use reserves to prioritize funding of district capital, I'm sorry, use reserves to prioritize funding of district capital reserves to prepare for phase 3 of the district's long-term facilities plan. Something
You
along
can
those.
get rid of use reserve. You
Yes.
can just say
To
prioritize funding.
Yes, prioritize funding. I apologize. Yep.
And then,
I love that.
And then would we keep transition to smaller?
You could say something
I
like
wanna
in
keep that
order
in there.
to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In order to transition.
Because that's
to.
the part I
That's
feel,
the point.
Yeah.
that's the part I feel
We want
most strong.
1, 2, 3, and then.
Can we, wherever we have it, can we take out the phrase learning environments and say schools? I know
No.
nobody
Because
talks
a
like.
learning environment is not limited to a building.
I understand that, but when people think and talk about think about Fairport, they think about schools. They don't think about a learning environment.
I can't.
I thought you.
It's not limited to a physical.
Yeah, I think we
I
need to
understand that,
keep
but
it.
the upkeep of schools and facilities.
Yeah, but that garden at JP is not a.
But that's
a
part
garden
of the
or a
school. That's part of the
school.
school. Yeah, it is. The garden
Yeah,
is
but
part
if
of
you
the
say
school.
it is, but do we say school facilities? I mean,
have district facilities. I have upkeep of district facilities.
I'll go.
Better.
I'll go there.
Better.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
allowed.
that's
I'll left.
MC
Allowed.
on this overall, right?
Yeah.
I think it
I'll stand alone.
somehow a
I'll
school
stand
just
alone.
seems like a building to me.
I
in my
just don't
mind,
think it-
regardless. It
yeah.
takes out the field.
I just think when we start, I understand why she's not wrong, but when I see the phrase learning environments and facilities, I think I'm reading, no offense to anybody, an SED briefing document instead of how people talk about this stuff.
oh, I don't.
SED briefing document.
No, it's fair.
I know
I,
that's your
See, and I think we need to have it be broader because there's folks that work in our district that would feel like we're counting them out if we're only talking about the building. So,
district facilities is fine.
District facilities.
so do we think we can update the agenda of the board business meeting with the new wording in terms of that's
Well,
something
I'm
we can
trying
potentially
to,
vote
trying
on?
to hustle.
All right.
Yeah.
So-
trying
He's
to
doing
get
it right now.
No dinner for you. Okay.
As a thought, since this is not a huge change, but a significant change, and there are 2 board members here who don't get to who haven't had input on this and see the changes made. Do we want to wait until November because of that, or do we want to? Are we okay with? I'm just offering up the question. It doesn't.
They gave feedback,
Yeah,
both
I've
of them
been
on the
looking at
agenda,
it.
and I don't think either of them had
yeah.
strong. And I think it's better to get the goals going.
One was at least planning on watching, so I hope they'll hear this discussion. I think it's a good point, and really glad we're thinking of other board members. It is that our budget message goes out if we approve the calendar, which we really need to, right? It goes out before our next meeting, and it would be good to have the goals settled.
That's just wanted to raise the point for discussion.
No, I am
Either
glad that
way,
we think of other people besides ourselves.
And I can double check while we, in between
Yeah.
with folks, I can text them. But I do think,
Check with people on the floor.
yes, I'll check with my people. So let's just go, since we do want to adjust it, and I know Brett's working on that, thank you. So for the first priority then, or I feel comfortable, but I want to check with everybody else with the 3 then that we would have: the developing universal pre-K, allocating resources to support and maximize student learning, MTSS, and then the providing equitable access to student-centered and WC programming. Are we good? Are we water? Are we? I feel good about it. Okay. And then with the second one, the keep long-term fiscal sustainability at the forefront of our budget process with a focus on maintaining a strong fiscal position or financial position, and then preserving the strong bond rating, which I can't imagine we would want to change either of those.
Can you define for me, what does that mean, maintaining a strong financial position?
And the strong bond rating.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the bond, right?
Yep. So it's essentially our ability to pay our debt, right? So we are AA right now, which is a strong financial position to, pay our obligations, and that's due to our reserve balances, our budgeting, where we land at the end of each year. They look at multiple factors that go into that. So it's maintaining that continuous ability to pay our obligations.
So is this like the?
It's like your credit
I was-
score.
that's what
Yeah,
I was
it,
saying.
it
It's like the
impacts
credit-
interest rates, right? So when we
Yeah.
go to borrow, it impacts our interest rates and
like-
what we can, who will bid on our debt as a whole. So there's a lot of different pieces that go into that.
Yeah. So it's,
The bond rating then different from maintain a strong financial position?
The
Or would you
financial
say-
position supports the bond rating in some aspect, but also the financial position, I think, speaks to our budgeting, our spending, are we deficit spending, right, all those different pieces. So I don't know if anybody from the committee wanted to add.
yeah, I think include everything they do well in that office, accounting for, right, and making sure things are safe. So to me, it's all of that, different than just the bond rating itself.
Right, because that's more specific.
No, I'm okay with number 2. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And important.
Okay. Brett, how are you feeling with your wordsmithing over there?
Well, I'll get some partners really quickly, and we'll confirm it.
Okay.
And then I'll share it with Lindsay, and we'll get it in board docs in the discussion portion. And the board can choose to do an action after we discuss it in public session again.
I don't know if I'm opening like a can of worms here, but I am. I know I'm taking over. I don't know if we have anything clearly that talks about like, we talk about fiscal sustainability, but we don't talk about like fiscal responsibility to like to taxpayers or to our community. Minimize, whether it's, I mean, I know we can't say we're going to minimize future tax impacts, but being thoughtful about,
Which I kind of thought
commu-
was
Do we?
what we were talking about
With
in
number
that.
2?
Yeah, no, well, that and also in
Yeah.
Right.
number 3.
I-
That was kind of the whole
nowhere
point.
do we talk about like just being transparent to the community, being responsible with tax dollars.
Jen, just looking at, I agree with you. I'm looking at the wordsmithing for number 2. Keep long-term fiscal sustainability and responsibility at the forefront of our budget process. Does that work?
Where would you put that?
So put
2.
fiscal number 2. Keep long-term. It says fiscal sustainability, and then add and responsibility. Kind of.
Yes, but then I think we would need an extra bullet.
Or you make that a bullet, can,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be its own bullet under number 2.
I like it.
Do you want the word
I do.
transparency or how it?
I think we have to get the
responsibility and
word.
transparent?
I think we have to somehow get in the word like transparency, just responsibility. I think that is a big feedback we're getting from our community and knowing the economy that we're living in,
So responsible
knowing the
and-
projects that we have coming up. I think it's a good thing to be thoughtful. I think we are thoughtful about, but I think it's a good thing to be mindful.
we say transparency and what did you say?
So responsible and transparent to our community.
Oh, you could say responsible and transparent to our community.
Responsible and
Maintain a
transparent.
Responsible. What's our rater way? Respectful, responsible.
Respectful, responsible.
I'm still
and-
thinking about this word.
No, it's what the kids.
No,
are
it's
It
using.
certainly
it's
was.
three
Say
things. Respectful, responsible. Come on, it's Minerva.
What am I got? I got nothing.
Prioritizing.
Resilient. Yeah, resilient.
Yeah. So
I like maintain.
maintain a respectful, responsible, and transparent budgeting process.
Yeah, I still think it's part of our, I do think it's part of our story.
Maintaining fiscal transparency and responsibility. Continuing, maintaining, I mean,
I like
Continuing, maintaining.
what do you like?
I know it could be, I
What is
feel
it?
like it could be continuing, but
Is that, yeah, that's.
What's another word for
synonym
continue?
enough, or-
only because I do feel like we do
I
it.
feel like we use
but
prioritized a lot.
continuing fiscal transparency and
Yeah, that's the
responsibility.
source,
Unrel-
I like that.
Relentlessly.
What do you guys
Can we
think?
combine it with our
Rel-
first bullet?
ongoing,
Maintaining
ongoing.
Can we do maintaining a strong financial position,
Advancing, preserving.
well-being,
well-being,
transparent.
responsible and transparent to stakeholders or
Drop the
None.
while, it just makes it
While-
sound, comma, being transparent.
Yeah.
Right?
okay,
Yeah,
maintaining a
responsible.
strong financial position, comma, being transparent
I mean, that's
and
part of,
responsible.
that's
No.
part of our
It's a minor
maintaining a
detail.
strong financial position is that responsibility, that transparency.
But I
So-
think we can say it. I think we need to say it.
Yeah,
So-
oh,
So
100%.
maintaining
Yeah.
a strong financial position, comma, being responsible and transparent.
Comma or
community.
semicolon.
Yeah, that's
Just-
I was gonna say, is it a separate
It feels,
thing? Like,
it feels semicolon-ish.
semicolon.
No. she
I
says
think it's a
no.
separate bullet.
No?
Separate bullet.
Separate
Yes,
bullet.
I
love
do
Lindsay.
too, but
I love you, Lindsay.
Oh, sure.
I liked what we had before instead of
Alright.
putting it
So
up
it's
there.
being
Responsible,
responsible and transparent and preserving, okay, so I'll make that
I mean,
the first
isn't-
one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go. It'll be number one. in the
Woohoo.
list of bullets.
No, I like that.
Do
'cause
we
it's-
need to have anything in there like to the community? Jan, what?
We
Being
are,
responsible and
we're stewards of
transparent.
the community.
No, I know. I'm just
to
saying.
stakeholders because
Stakeholders.
Yeah,
if we have
stakeholders.
I want to be responsible and transparent even if we have one of our educators lives in
Yeah, Webster.
yeah
Penfield.
like
Mm-hmm.
to our
to our
stakeholders.
stakeholders.
Or just not. I don't think, do we need to identify who we're being responsible for?
To me, it's inherent.
It is to
But I
me
think
too,
ours
but
is inherent.
Superfluous to say who we are doing it for.
Yeah, because transparency is anybody and everybody can come and
That's
see
true.
it, right?
Lindsay, what are your thoughts hypothetically?
I like stakeholders because it's so much a part of our.
I know.
Okay.
That's fine. It's good. No, it's good. Yeah.
okay. So now we feel comfortable with that.
Did I get that?
one?
I
Thank
just
you.
can't get the bullets. I don't know how to do it in this thing.
And then we're moving down the investing in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities as number 3. And then I'll let
Invest in modern, environmentally sustainable and safe facilities, which includes
Number 1, dedicating financial resources to support the modernization and upkeep of district facilities. 2, prioritizing funding of district capital reserves to prepare for phase 3 of district's long-term facilities plans in order to transition to smaller projects.
that's a big run-on sentence.
I think we should have transition to smaller scaled capital projects as a separate bullet.
I agree.
Just so
well,
it stands out more and doesn't get lost at the end
Yeah.
of it.
I
What-
think that becomes separate from that, though. I understand if
But
you.
but isn't that part of the investing in modern environment? Why wouldn't that fall under it?
It would having because we're not going to immediately go to smaller projects.
Until we do phase 3.
Yeah.
Right, but it says transition to.
Well, then we could.
Yeah, it's in there in order to transition to smaller projects.
But not having
Okay, is it just
No,
the
no, I'm-
longest sentence ever?
It's long-
It is. It's
It
a
is,
long
it's a
one.
long,
Okay,
long
that's
sentence.
my only
I agree.
concern.
Not the preamble of the
Yes.
sentence.
Okay. Okay, as long as we don't mind.
You know, so these bullets aren't always necessarily going to live
With
with the
the-
budget goals. These are for our talking
Yes.
points.
Okay.
And they'll come and go. They'll be in commentators.
When-
They'll be part of our story. But the bullets are for they're our cliff notes, if you
Okay.
will.
Yeah, no, they're good reminders for any of us, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, I hope we're part of the budget communication and other things. Right? What's our emphasis?
Okay, so
So do I have permission to add this as a discussion action item at the business meeting?
yes.
Yes.
I'm
And I
going
will-
to send this over to Sarah and Lindsay to really tighten it up, and we'll put it in the public section of discussion action.
Okay, so any other workshop related? Are we good? Okay, so I was just gonna, for folks, watching from home, next we actually get to go and honor the staff that is receiving tenure. So we'll be gone for about an hour, just celebrating and congratulating our new, or not new, our tenured teachers and staff, administrators. But we will be back at 7 p.m. Kicking off the board business meeting. And I need a motion to adjourn. Jan? Mary Caitlin? All in favor? Aye.